flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
But I think certainly for Minnesota, the idea of Beverley really resonated with Rosas, with Chris Finch, and he goes in there, and he's going to play an important role for that team as they try to move closer to getting perhaps in contention for the play-in tournament.
Whoa. Was that a Woj bomb? Is he reporting? is he reporting Timberwolves, the 10 seed? Is that what just happened there?
They might be in the top 10. We're all like, oh, really? That'd be awesome.
My sources tell me.
Love that little Woj bomb there. Little drop in the. We hear Timberwolves playing tournament. We're like, oh, yes.
Yes.
Dead. This is Mackey and Judd, daily Minnesota sports entertainment. We just want titles. Or in this case, we just want the play-in tournament for our Minnesota Timberwolves.
Don't push this one too far.
For just this team. Just this team.
Yeah.
So we've got Write That Down predictions today on the show and an accountability session. When are you guys going to admit that you were wrong? Every Wednesday, actually, on Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily. But boys, yesterday, so we were all in on this Patrick Beverley trade. You can find all sorts of breakdowns from us. Dane Moore was on the show yesterday, Doogie. So all you can eat on that front. And it kind of overshadowed the initial, not Woj bomb, but like a Woj
Grenade?
Grenade? A
Flashbang?
A Woj flashbang.
Yeah.
Woj flashbang.
Grenade carries a lot of impact as well. I think a flashbang. Because we're not trying to, he's not going to kill you with it.
A Woj flashbang yesterday morning. So on Get Up with our friend of the show, Mike Greenberg, he said the Wolves are still being, and he used the word persistent, on Ben Simmons, but they'd almost certainly need a third team to complete a deal. The Sixers aren't getting the offers right now that they would want, whether it's from the Wolves or from elsewhere. So that made the rounds yesterday around the aggregator blogosphere. And some of the Philadelphia blogs picked this up too, and we're saying, okay, all right, so what would this have to look like? So this is what NBC Sports Philadelphia is saying. Reckless speculation Thursday on a Wednesday here. Karl Anthony Towns is both off the board and a bad fit in Philadelphia. Anthony Edwards is springy and electric, but he's cheap for a few more years, and I don't see Minnesota parting with such a young and promising talent to add a flawed star like Simmons. D'Angelo Russell is still just 25 years old and would be a good offensive fit at point guard, but his defensive on-off splits are awful, and there's plenty of reason to think that the standout year with the Nets was just an outlier. Does a combination of Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley, and future draft picks from the Wolves and maybe other teams do it for Daryl Morey and the Sixers? Literally, he writes, When you have your sights set on the likes of Damian Lillard, that's a tough sell as a consolation prize. So there appears to be, even with like Philadelphia media, there appears to be a huge... It's funny because in this same paragraph, NBC Sports Philadelphia says Simmons is a flawed superstar. And then later... They're like, Damian Lillard, and I guess if you have to settle for Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley, and a bunch of first-round picks, then I guess we'll settle for it. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, wait, that piece starts out really well. Cat is a bad fit there, and he's not on the table. And then he's right about Ant. So don't put him in the trade. First of all, I think if Ant is in the trade...
I guess if we have to settle for Anthony Edwards...
But the Sixers make that trade. The Sixers make that trade. They have a flawed superstar who is saying he doesn't want to go back there. You know what you lose when a guy says, I'm not going back there? Leverage. So that's a great start to the story and then a really bad turn. If Gerson calls up the Sixers today and says, Ant Edwards and Daryl Morey says, done deal now. Like this, that's Ant Edwards as a starting point there gets the deal done. We're all trying to get around that because we don't believe that Gerson will trade him. So the question I thought that was going to be is, okay, if Ant's not involved and Cat's not involved, who would they trade? But the talk about Dame and stuff, let's stop right there. Ladies and gentlemen, if player X says, my time here is done, and he might be signed, that's fine. But if he says, I want out, and it gets out publicly, You know why GMs hate that? The leverage goes down. Nobody is going to go to them and say, well, I'm going to give you Dame and some draft picks too now. So that's a ridiculous piece based on the fact that, well, one, it brushes off Ant, which is absolutely stupid because the Sixers would not do that. And two, from the Minnesota perspective, this entire discussion is how do you make the trade without Cat or Ant? Because it's my firm belief neither one of them is going anywhere.
Yeah, I think so. I disagree with you a little in that I think Daryl Morey, I think he wants we think Ant is going to be a superstar. And I don't know, you guys probably saw that clip where he's literally cashing like 5 consecutive 40-foot three-pointers.
I saw your head
workout.
pop up, actually, is what I saw.
I was
saw
very
the
excited,
clip,
yes.
And then I saw your bald head start to emerge in the frame.
And
I couldn't look away from your bald head at that point.
You can see that exclusive content on the Score North TikTok and Instagram pages, which we are having fun with on a daily basis. So I think Daryl Morey is looking at more established, like in a perfect world. And this is part of the reason why the trade hasn't happened yet, because Portland's probably looking over at Philadelphia saying, wait a second, if we're going to trade Dame Lillard, we need somebody that can actually like be willing to shoot in the fourth quarter. Like we're going to go from one of the most clutch players in the modern history of the NBA, a guy Dame time who's just pulling up from 40 feet and cashing game-winning jumpers, to a guy that like refuses to shoot layups in the fourth quarter. I mean, we can talk, but you're going to have to get it would have to be like Simmons plus for Dame. And so I from the Wolves' perspective, I still want the Wolves to trade for Ben Simmons for 3 main reasons, all right? Number one, despite his shooting woes, he's still a really good player. Like, people have lost sight of this. We talked with Dane about this a little bit yesterday. It's like people have said, well, he doesn't pull the trigger in the fourth quarter and he can't make a free throw and he had the yips and all these things, so he's worthless, right? Not worthless. He's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. He's one of the best. He can guard 5 positions. He's one of the best passers and open court vision guys. He can rebound really well. So he's got all these different things he brings to the table. Yes, he has deficiencies, but I don't think anyone's looking at him to be the number 1 superstar on a team. In fact, if the Wolves traded for him, ideally he'd be like the 3rd guy, maybe even the 4th guy if they were able to keep D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards. Number 2, he's still young. He just turned 25 years old this summer, and so he fits the Timberwolves window for when they're trying to win. And the third thing is, whoever gets him, I think is going to get him for like 50 or 75 cents on the dollar compared to what he would have gone for a year ago. Right. I mean, a year ago, we were literally talking about Ben Simmons for the number 1 overall pick, right? And number 1 overall pick and then maybe other things to match salaries. And so, like, for all those reasons, I want the Timberwolves to continue to be, as Woj said, persistent on a trade for Simmons. I just don't know how the puzzle works for them when you start to look at like what they've already done this off. They already traded the Rubio trade chip. I was verifying again this morning with Doogie. All right, so Taurean Prince is a nice like $14 million trade chip. You can't include other players with him in a trade until October. Mm-hmm. So like to even if it was like Beasley and Taurean Prince and picks to a 3rd team, and then the 3rd team sends Beal or whatever, you couldn't even do that with Taurean Prince until 6 weeks from now. So I almost feel like with that Patrick Beverley trade yesterday, the Wolves have kind of said, we're still exploring the Ben Simmons thing, but we can't just wait around all summer. We got to make this team better and bring in some toughness and some defense and some 3-point shooting. And so yesterday almost felt like, all right, we're not waving the white flag on Simmons, but we got to do something to help this year's team.
So if the Sixers had gotten the offer that they want for this guy, he'd be gone by now. And so I think what they're going to have to accept eventually, and they probably know this, but it's hard to accept, it is the fact that you said they are going to trade him probably for 75 cents on the dollar. And that's not going to get them the trade that they want exactly. Gerson's smart enough too. It's not a bad move to go out and get a guy who is seen as a culture guy, a good defensive guy, and call up your old friend Daryl and say, man, I'm just about out on this. I mean, if we can't do this, because it's going to apply pressure. If Ben Simmons shows up at training camp for the Sixers, it's going to be a story and an issue and a distraction that would be worth putting up for if you thought he was going to stick around long term, right? But if he's not, it's best to move him now. So I wonder if Morey's going to come to the realization that at some point in time here, he's going to have to look at the best offers and make that trade. Like, I think it's more logical the Wolves get Ben Simmons than the Trailblazers ever trade Dame for him. Because that, to me, the Trailblazers, look, first of all, Dame has not come out, I don't think, ever and officially said, I want out. Like, it's been out there sort of loosely, but then he's come out and publicly said
I think
that.
he's been planting seeds, but he hasn't like done the
Right.
full like burn the bridges thing.
But there's not a frontal. It's not frontal yet. So I think if Portland's going to trade him, it's going to be in a package where they control the price completely. So yeah, I think this is all going down a path of the Sixers, unless something drastically changes here. The Sixers need to accept that this guy probably is going to have to be dealt. And don't forget too, he's coming off, as talented as Ben Simmons might be, he's coming off a bad playoff series in which it was embarrassingly bad shooting wise in Philadelphia, not in Miami, not in Minnesota. You know, he's a pariah among the fans there. And
they'll turn on you a lot quicker and make your life more miserable and harder to pull out of a slump.
And you talk about sports talk call-in shows there, they will. So if you take him to opening night and cross your fingers and say, I hope it's fine now, and it's not, it gets uglier from there. And that's where you go down a path of, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have to trade him now. I think that the Sixers are smart enough to probably know the best alternative is to find the best package they can possibly get right now, which is why if you're the Wolves, I think you got an outside shot in a 3-team trade and make the move, because that market is among, if not the most brutal in sports.
So I want to lay out, sort of to your point there, how could it still work for the Timberwolves?
Reckless speculation.
And this reckless speculation Thursday on a Wednesday is powered by our friends at PXG Minneapolis. PXG is here to help you improve your golf game. PXG Minneapolis is a golfer's paradise. They've got some of the best clubs on the market right now. You can test them out. And just a fun place to walk into, quite frankly. It's a mecca of golf for enthusiasts. And that summer apparel is still, I might have to switch to the fall apparel here soon. When the state fair's over, it tends to switch over. But check them out, PXG Minneapolis in Southdale Center and PXG.com/Minneapolis. So if the Wolves were to deal with Philadelphia one-on-one, they'd almost certainly have to trade D'Angelo Russell. Like, even just from like a salary standpoint. I mean, Philadelphia needs two things. You need to match the salaries, and Ben Simmons on a multi-year deal is about $35 million a year. So you have to come close to matching the salaries. And Philadelphia, in a one-on-one trade, would need someone to be a good Robin to the Joel Embiid Batman, right? You'd need, presumably they're looking for someone that can make shots in the fourth quarter and that can just be a little bit more of a complementary player to Joel Embiid. The closest thing the Timberwolves have is D'Angelo Russell. I don't know that Philadelphia looks at him as like the star that they want to acquire for Ben Simmons. And the problem for the Wolves is they'd be breaking up their main core three players, Cat, Ant, and D'Lo, that they really liked down the stretch last year. So Simmons and Russell, let's say you made that swap. Let's say Philadelphia was like, all right, we're not getting Lillard, we're not getting Beal. The Warriors thing fell through, and so we got to move this guy. We're not in love with the Timberwolves package, but D'Lo is a better fit opposite Embiid than Ben Simmons, and I'm just going down this path. The problem for the Wolves is you'd have to decide, is it like, would you want to swap D'Lo for the like literal polar opposite player in Ben Simmons? Like, you couldn't find two more opposite skill sets. D'Lo, offense, shooting, needs the ball all the time, defense optional, right? Simmons doesn't need to shoot more than 8 to 10 times a game oftentimes, lanky, perimeter defender, rebounder, all those things. I actually think Simmons, if you just had to make that swap, I actually think there's a chance Simmons would be better for this team than D'Lo. But again, it's like, how would that land with Cat? It would just be a huge shakeup that you'd have to be prepared to handle on multiple levels because you'd be swapping out polar opposite players. If the Wolves pull a third team in, which is what Woj is saying, and that's probably the more likely route, because I don't think, like, if Philadelphia wanted D'Lo, and if the Wolves thought D'Lo for Simmons was a good swap, I think it would have happened by now. So I think getting a third team involved is the most realistic. But let's say it's Portland. Well, Portland doesn't need the Wolves. If Portland wants to trade Damian Lillard, the salaries pretty much match. Like if Portland wants to trade Dame Lillard for Ben Simmons and a couple picks, they would just do it. They don't need the Wolves involved. They don't need the Wolves involved for money. They don't need the Wolves involved for really anything else other than, like, if the Wolves were involved, they wouldn't be getting Ben Simmons. Portland would be getting Ben Simmons. And so the Wolves, they really need a team like Washington. And Bradley Beal, much like Damian Lillard, has kind of hinted that he kind of wants out, but he hasn't hit the nuke button yet. He hasn't hit the, like, I want out, get me the bleep out of here.
They're a potential mess. So trading him makes more sense than Dame.
It's actually kind of amazing that Beal hasn't been more frontal about wanting out. Like, I don't know what he's clinging to in Washington.
No idea.
Like, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, let's say Beal, who makes about the same amount of money as Simmons, so the salaries would match. The problem there would be if you're Washington, would you just want to swap Beal for Simmons, or would you want sort of like a multitude of future picks and assets and whatnot? I don't know that Washington would need the Wolves involved. Like the Wolves could get involved, and maybe Washington would say, we don't really want Ben Simmons, but we would trade Beal for like 3 future first-round picks that the Wolves could give.
That's it. Yes.
So you're kind of hoping that it's Washington as a third team, unless there's another option out there that I'm not thinking of.
If I'm Washington, does Ben Simmons really help me a ton? Because I'm not good.
You're not going to be good for 2 or 3 years
right.
either, and he's expensive, and his contract will be up.
So I want what you can give me as far as draft picks go and as far as young players go. This is where I think there would be no question in the path you're going down. Jaden McDaniels goes to Washington.
But here's the problem. I agree with that, but here's the problem. If you're the Wolves, you have to find like 35, let's say like $30-ish million in contracts to trade, and you can't include Taurean Prince with another player, so he's off the board. So just from like a pure puzzle, like financial puzzle perspective, Beasley makes, I want to say 14 or 15. So he's like, all right, Beasley's out.
Yep.
Jaden McDaniels is only like $2, $3, $4 million. So now you're kind of down to, you got D'Lo at 30, you got Taurean Prince, who you can't include, so he's out. So it's basically Patrick Beverley's $14 million. So you'd be trading Patrick Beverley, who's 33, and he'd be on his 4th team in like a month. You'd be trading Beverley and Malik Beasley and Jaden McDaniels to make the money work, and then like a couple future first-round picks. I mean, that's a lot. Like, you're giving up one of the best 3-point shooters. You're giving up a good hard-nosed two-way player, and then Jaden McDaniels and like for Ben Simmons, and like I don't know that I don't know if I'm gonna. I would feel more comfortable with like Rubio. Go back in retrospect, Rubio's salary, Beasley, and then picks. Beverly, Beasley, McDaniels, and a pick is like, all right.
Hey,
I like Ben Simmons, but
put down the Wolves Kool-Aid and realize if you're going to get this guy, it's going to cost you a ton. Like, but I mean, this is where you have to think this through now and say, would you make the trade? And the answer might be no. But the point is, like, if you're going to do this with a third team or not, it's going to cost you. Like, you're not going to get a trade where you're like, we won that for sure. There's going to be some indecision here. And I think McDaniels would absolutely, for any team that wants youth, be a key part. And that kid, to our basketball scout here, Dex's credit, I have no idea how he knew it, but that kid's special. I mean, he's a good player, hell of a player.
I don't know if he's special yet. In fact, I almost feel like you can probably take advantage of like people thinking he's special to sell high on him.
He's far more special than I expected. How about that?
Yeah, and the thing about him too is like, even if he's not special, if he's just a really good rotation player for the next 4 years at like $3 million, whatever I have to go look, $4 million a year, that's a valuable thing. So would you rather trade D'Lo, let's say D'Lo and like something else for Ben Simmons in a one-on-one deal with Philadelphia and swap polar opposite players? Or would you rather give up like Malik Beasley, Pat Beverley, Jaden McDaniels, and let's say a future first-round pick?
I'm giving up D'Lo. He's got some big shot ability. He obviously can get hot every once in a while, but what's the point of always hitting those buckets if this team can't play defense? And I think Ben Simmons brings more value than D'Lo's going to bring. And I know D'Lo was the man in Brooklyn there for a little bit and helped out Brooklyn, but also it was the East, and the East is very, very soft compared to the West. And I'd much rather facilitate a trade around D'Angelo Russell and maybe a draft pick or two than punt on Jaden McDaniels and mortgaging out the farm just to get Ben Simmons. I really like D'Lo's fun when he's hot, but mostly I think he's honestly kind of overrated. That's kind of where I'm looking at.
I agree. I think he's overrated.
So what's the straight 1-for-1 trade then, Phil?
What do you
D'Lo
mean?
and
Like
what? If it's a Wolves Sixers trade, what's the trade?
I think it would be D'Lo plus something. And then it kind of depends on what is the something. Like I've seen some ideas floated out, like would you do like D'Lo and Malik for, like maybe it's D'Lo, Malik, and a pick for Simmons and Seth Curry, so that you're swapping shooters, you're making salaries work, and you're giving Philadelphia a little extra rub with a future first round pick or something. To Declan's point, I think people can be hard on D'Lo. I was hard on D'Lo early last year when Cat was out. It's like, dude, if D'Lo is as good as advertised, like why are they still getting beat by 40, 25 points, 30? Like the game should be more competitive. He's a good player. I don't think he's like the leader of a team ever. But if you're telling me at some point there would be a way, the only way to get Simmons is to swap D'Lo, I would say, all right, if it can be D'Lo and something that doesn't take everything out of your cupboards. And my ball handlers are now, so I've got Cat, I've still got Taurean Prince, so I've got ideally Jaden McDaniels, I've got some nice wing players and some length out there. And my ball handlers are now Anthony Edwards and Ben Simmons. And I've got Patrick Beverley still for this season. And Jalen Noel. Jalen Noel was like the third leading scorer in the Summer League. He showed some promise last year. I don't think you have a problem with ball handlers. I think your defense gets a lot better. And Anthony Edwards should be in a place where he's taking a lot of the shots late in the games. And so I wouldn't be opposed to that. Ideally, if you're going to get Simmons, you would do it while keeping D'Lo, but I just don't know if that's going to be possible anymore with the trade chips that they've shipped out to this point.
So I've got I think I've got what the potential current ask is and why this deal's not done. So my guess is this: it's Curry and Simmons. You're right on that. It's D'Lo, Beasley, and my guess is they're asking for McDaniels back as well. Because if you're the Sixers, think about what Jaden McDaniels. So if you're trading this kid who is a good defender and basically a hard worker, right? Like his problems are probably mental. They're not lack of effort. They're not he's a bad kid. I don't think at least that he is. My guess is that they're asking for McDaniels back because McDaniels brings the same type of mentality and skill set as far as work goes.
Listen,
not as talented, obviously.
Yeah. So you're saying, so this deal, I'm just pulling up. I just want to see what Jay McDaniels is $2 million cap it this year.
Yeah, not much.
Which, by the way, that's such a bargain. Like if he's going to be a rotation player who plays great defense,
but he's the guy that would intrigue. But if I'm making a trade and I want the world back from you, he intrigues me.
So, okay, just for fun here.
So this is D'Lo. This is reckless speculation, baby.
Reckless speculation.
So I don't think you'd need the Beasley Curry swap here, but I think the Wolves would be saying like, listen, let's try and beef this thing up. Let's try and I'll scratch your back, you scratch ours. Like we can't just like what they would say is, all right, D'Lo for Simmons would be the ideal swap, potentially. But the Sixers would say, well, we need a little something more. And the Wolves would say, okay, well, we could give you Beasley, but now the salaries don't work out.
Right.
And we lost two of our best shooters, so what are you going to give us? And that's how these things go from like 1-for-1s to like 5-player trades, right?
Yep.
So if you went down that path, if it was D'Lo and Beasley, that's $44 million in cap. Jaden makes it 46. And the Sixers would be sending you Ben Simmons 33, and this is just for this year. That goes up next year. and Seth Curry at like 8, so that would be 41.
Mm-hmm.
And where are the Sixers to the luxury right now? That's the
Well,
one thing.
and they just signed Embiid to a supermax yesterday.
Yep. So I'd have to see. It looks like they've got $8 million in luxury tax space. So they would be able to. So that would be a $5 million difference. They would be able to do that. So, it's interesting. It's interesting. When Woj says the Wolves are being persistent, that's very, very interesting because he doesn't just float that. It's kind of feels like the Sixers want to date Lillard and maybe somebody else, and maybe they're talking with the Warriors, but the Wolves are the team that keeps knocking on the door and saying,
Yes.
"What about us? What about us? Here's an idea. Hey, what about this? We got trade machine guy.
Yep.
Here's
And my guess is that Portland's like, dude, if we're going to make this trade, we control it. Like if you look at the potential Wolves Sixers trade, the Wolves control, or I'm sorry, the Sixers control it, right? Like they've got the player that the Wolves want. I think in the reverse case with the Trailblazers, Portland has the player the Sixers want.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing the negotiating dynamic with Portland is very different than what Gerson has going on with his old buddy Daryl Morey.
Oh, interesting. So there's
That's
your
just
little
reckless.
fix-up.
That's just reckless speculation.
Reckless speculation.
Reckless
Nothing more than
speculation.
reckless speculation, which isn't
Thursday
fun.
on a
It's
Wednesday.
a lifestyle.
You know what else is a lifestyle? Helping businesses for Federated. That's all that. They're just sitting there,
That's important stuff.
just one-on-one relationships, and they've been around for over 100 years. They've got all kinds of services and resources. You can find out more through their website about training systems, MyShield, risk management, the Federated Risk Management Academy, the 7-minute safety trainer, all kinds of things. Federatedinsurance.com. And remember, at Federated, it's our business to protect yours. So, let's take a deep breath here. Let's collect ourselves because we've got Write That Down and an accountability session coming up next on the show. Mackey and Judd.